AKALLABÊTH, the downfall of Numenor. It's said by the elder that man came into the world in the time of the shadow of Morgoth, and they fell swiftly under his dominion, for he sent his emissaries among them, and they listened to his evil and cunning words. And they worshipped the darkness and yet feared it. But there were some that turned from evil and left the lands of their kindred, and wandered ever westward, for they heard and rumored that in the west there was a light which the shadow could not dim. The servants of Morgoth pursued them with the hatred, and their ways were long and hard. Yet they came at last to the lands that look upon the sea, and they entered Beleriand in the days of the War of the Jewels. The Eden thus were named in Cinder and tongue, and they became friends and allies of the Eldar, and the deeds of a great valor in the war against Morgoth. Of them was Sporong upon the side of his fathers, bright Eärendil, and in the lay of Eärendil it's told how at last, when the victory of Morgoth was almost complete, he built his ship Fingilot, that the man called Rothinzel, and voyaged upon the unsailed seas, seeking ever for Valinor, for he desired to speak before the powers on behalf of the two kindreds, that the Valar might have pity on them, and send them help in their uttermost need. Therefore by elves and men he is called Eärendil the Blessed, for he achieved his quest after long labours and many perils, and from Valinor there came the host of the lords of the west. But Eärendil came never back to the lands that he had loved. In the great battle when at last Morgoth was overthrown and Targondrum was broken, the Eden lone of the kindreds of men fought for the Valar, whereas many other fought for Morgoth. And after the victory of the lords of the west, those of the evil men who were not destroyed fled back into the east, where many of their race were still wandering in the unharvested lands, wild and lawless, refusing alike the summons of the Valar and of Morgoth. And the evil men came among them, and cast over them a shadow of fear, and they took them for kings. Then the Valar forsook for a time the men of Middle-earth who had refused their summons, and had taken the friends of Morgoth to be their masters. And men dwelt in darkness, and were troubled by many evil things that Morgoth had devised in the days of his dominion, demons and dragons and misshapen beasts, and the unclean orcs that are mockeries of the children of Ilúvatar. And the lot of men was unhappy. But Manwë put forth Morgoth, and shut him beyond the world in the void that is without, and he cannot himself return again into the world, present and visible, while the lords of the west are still enthroned. Yet the seeds that he had planted still grow unsprouted, bearing evil fruit, if any will tend them. For his will remained and guided his servants, moving them ever to thwart the will of the Valar, and to destroy those that obeyed them. Thwart means deny or resist. This the Lord of the West knew full well, when therefore Morgoth had been thrust forth. They hield counsel concerning the age that should come after. The elder they summoned to return into the west, and those that hearkened to the summons dwelt in the isle of Ersie, and there is in that land a haven that is named Avalone, for it's of all the cities that nearest to Valinor. Here haven means this, like the land of or the dock of the ships, where the ships land. Yeah. For it's of all the cities that nearest to Valinor, and the tower of Avalon is the first sight that the mariner beholds when at last he draws nigh to the undying lands, over the leads of the sea. To the fathers of men of the three faithful houses rich reward also was given. Onwe came among them and taught them, and they were given wisdom and power and life more enduring than any others of mortal race have possessed. A land was made for the Eden to dwell in, neither part of Middle-earth nor of Valinor, for it was sundered from either by a wide sea. Yet it was nearer to Valinor. It was raised by Osse out of the depth of the great water, and it was established by Aule and enriched by Yavanna. And the elder brought thither flowers and fountains of Tul Ersie. At land the Valar called Andor, the land of gift, and the star of Eärendil shone bright in the west as token that all was made ready, and as a guide over the sea, and men marveled to see that silver flame in the paths of the sun. Then the Eden set sail upon the deep water, following the star, and the Valar laid a peace upon the sea for many days, and sent sunlight and sailing wind, so that the waters glittered before the eyes of the Eden like rippling glass. And the foam flew like snow before the stems of the stairship, but so bright was Rothinzel that even at morning men could see it glimmering in the west, and in the cloudless night it shone alone, for no other star could stand beside it. And setting their course toward it, that Eden came the last over league of the sea, and saw afar the land that was prepared for them, Andor, the land of gift, shimmering in the golden haze. Then they went up out of the sea, and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad, and they called that land Elena, which is starwards, but also Anduine, which is the westerness, Numenor, in the high Eldrin tongue. That was the beginning of the people that in the grey elven speech are called the Dundane, the Numenorians, king among men. They did not thus escape from the doom of death that Ilúvatar had set upon all mankind, and they were mortal still, though their years were long, and they knew no sickness ere the shadow fell upon them. Therefore they grew wise and glorious, and in all things more like to the firstborn than any other of the kindreds of men. And all they were tall, taller than the tallest of the sons of Middle Earth, and the light of their eyes was like bright stars. But their numbers increased only slowly in the land, for though daughters and sons were born to them fairer than their fathers, yet the children were few. Of old, the chief city and haven of Númenor was in the midst of its western coast, and it was called Anduine, because it faced the sunset. But in the midst of the land was a mountain tall and steep, and its name the Minaltarma, the pillar of heaven. And upon it was a high place that was hallowed to Ilúvatar. It was open and unroofed, and no other temple or fane, same as temple, but just a different of concepts, was there in the land of the Númenorian. At the feet of the mountain were built the tombs of the kings, and hard by upon a hill was Armenelos, fairest of cities, and there stood the tower and the citadel that was raised by Elros son of Eärendil, whom the Valar appointed to be the first king of Dundane. Now Elros and Elrond his brother were descended from the three houses of Eden, but in part also both from the Eldar and the Maiar, for Edril of Gondolin and Luthien daughter of Melian were their four mothers. The Valar indeed may not withdraw the gift of death, which comes to men from Ilúvatar, but in the matter of the half-elven Ilúvatar gave to them the judgment, and they judged that to the sons of Eärendil should be given choice of their own destiny, and Elrond chose to remain with the firstborn, and to him the life of the firstborn was granted. But to Elros, who chose to be the king of men, still a great span of years was allotted, many times that of the men of Middle Earth and all his line. The kings and the lords of the royal house had long life, even according to the measures of the Númenorian. But Elros lived 500 years, and ruled the Númenorians 400 years and 10. Thus the years passed, and while Middle Earth went backward, the light and the wisdom faded. The Dundane dwelt under the protection of the Valar and the friendship of the Eldar, and they increased in stature both of mind and body. For though these people used still their own speech, their kings and lords knew and also spoke also the Elven tongue, which they had learned in the days of their alliance. And thus they held converse still with the Eldar, whether of Erisea or of the westlands of Middle Earth, and the law masters among them learned also the high Eldarian tongue of the Blessed Realm, in which much story and song was preserved from the beginning of the world. And they made letters and scrolls and books. Scrolls mean scripts, and wrote in them many things of wisdom and wonder in the high tide of their realm, of which all it's now forgot. So it came to pass that beside their own names, all the lords of the Númenorian also had also Eldarin names, and they like with the cities and fair places that they founded in Númenor and on the shores of Hitherland. For the Dundane became mighty in craft, so that if they had the mind, they could easily have surpassed the evil kings of the Middle Earth, and the making of war and the forging of weapons. But they were become men of peace. Above all else, they nourished the shipbuilding and seacraft, and they became mariners whose like shall never be again. Since the world was diminished, and voyaging upon the wide seas was the chief feat and adventure of their hardy men in the gallant days of their youth. Gallant, first allotted means give or apportion, while gallant means brave. But the lords of the Valinor forbade them to sail so far westward that the coast of Númenor could no longer be seen, and for long the Dúnedain were content, though they did not fully understand the purpose of this ban. But the design of many was that the Númenorians should not be tempted to seek for the blessed realm, nor desire to overpass the limits set to their place, becoming enamored of the mortality of the Valar and the Eldar and the lands where all things endure. For in those days Valinor still remained in the world visible, and the Ilúvatar permitted the Valar to maintain upon earth as an abiding place, a memorial of that which might have been if Morgoth had not cast his shadow on the world. Thus the Númenorian knew full well, and all times when all the air was clear and the sun was in the east, they would look out and descry far. Descry means glance or behold. Far off in the west, a city white shining on the distant shore, and a great harbour and a tower. A harbour, same meaning as deck of the ships, and a tower, as dark as haven. For in those days the Númenorians were far-sighted, yet even so it was only the nearest eyes among them that could see the vision. Nearest means the broadest. From the Minel Tarma, maybe, or from some tall ship that lay off their western coast, as far as it was lawful for them to go, for they did not dare to break the ban of the lords of the west. But the wise among them knew that the distant land was not indeed the blessed realm of Valinor, but was Avalonia, the haven of the Eldar upon Ercia, easternmost of the undying land, and thence at times that firstborn still would come sailing to Númenor in oilless boats, as white birds flying from the sunset. And they brought to Númenor many gifts, bird of songs and fragrant flowers. Fragrant means just like having a pleasant or sweet smell, and herbs of a great virtue. Virtue means of great honor, and a seeding that brought of Celeborn, the white tree that grew in the midst of Ercia, and that was in turn a seeding of Galathylion, the tree of Tuna, the image of Beleriand that Yavanna gave to the Eldar in the blessed realm. And the tree grew and blossomed in the courts of the kings of Erminolas. Nimloth it was named, and flowered in the evening, and in the shadow of night it filled with the fragrance. Thus it was that because of the ban of the Valar, the voyage of Dúnedain in those days went ever eastward and not westward, from the darkness of the north to the heat of the south, and beyond the south to the nether darkness. Nether means the deep darkness. And they came even to the inner seas and sailed about Middle-earth, and glimpsed from their high brows the half of the ship's bow that is floating on the sea, just like the front end of the ship. Rose the gates of the morning in the east, and the Dúnedain came at times to the shores of the great lands, and they took pity on the forsaken world of Middle-earth. And the lords of the Númenor set foot again upon the western shore in the dark hues of men, and none yet dared to withstand them, for most of the men of that age that sat under the shadow were now grown weak and fearful. And coming among them the Númenorians taught them many things, corn and wine they bought, and they instructed men in the sowing of seed, and the grinding of grain, in the hewing of wood, and the shaping of stone, and in the ordering of their life, such as it might be in the lands of swift death and little bliss. Then the man Middle-earth was comforted, and here and there upon the western shores the houseless wood drew back, and men shook off the yoke of the offspring of Morgoth. Yoke here means the cross piece of wood fastened into two attached to a plough or cart, fastened to an animal and attached with a plough or cart. That's the meaning of yoke, of the offspring of Morgoth, and unlearned their terror of the dark, and they revered the memory of the tall sea kings, and when they had departed they called them gods, hoping for their return. For a time the Númenorians dwelt never long in Middle-earth, nor made there as yet any habitation of their own. Habitation means dwelling of their own, as toward they must sail, but ever waste their heart returned. Now this yearning grew ever greater with the years, and the Númenorians began to hunger for the undying city that they saw from afar, and the desire for everlasting life to escape from death and the ending of delight grew strong upon them, and ever as their power and glory grew greater, their iniquity increased. Iniquity means upsetting or unrestful. For though the Valar had rewarded the Dúnedain with a long life, they could not take from them the awareness of the world that come at last. And they died, even their kings of the seed of Erendil, and the span of their life was brief in the eyes of Eldar. Thus it was that a shadow fell upon them, and which maybe the will of Morgoth was at work that still moved in the world. And the Númenorians began to murmur, at first their hearts, and then in open words, against the doom of men, and most of the all against the ban which forbade them to sail into the west. And they said among themselves, why do the lords of the west sit there in the peace unending, while we must die and go where we know no whither, leaving our home and all that we may have made? And the elder die not, even those that rebelled against the lords, and since we must have mastered all seas, and no water is now wild or so wide that our ship cannot overcome it, why should we not go to Avalon and greet there our friends? And some there say, who said, why should we not go even to a man and test there, were it but for a day, the place of the powers? Have we not become mighty among the people of Ada? The elder reported these words to the Valar, and Manwë was grieved, seeing a cloud gather on the noontide of Númenor, and he sent messengers to Dúnedain, who spoke earnestly to the king. Earnestly means seriously, and just like of warning, and to all who would listen, concerning the fate and fashion of the world. The doom of the world, they said, when alone can change who made it, and where you soar to voyage that, escaping all deceits and snares, you come indeed to a man. The blessed realm, little will it profit to you. For it's not the land of Manwë that makes its people deathless, but the deathless that dwell therein have hallowed land, and there you will not but wither and grow weary the sooner, as moths in the light too strong and steadfast. But the king said, and does not Erendil my forefather live, or is he not in the land of Aman? To which they answered, you know that he has a fate apart, and was adjudged to the firstborn who die not. Yet this is also his doom, that he can never return again to the mortal lands, whereas you and your people are not of the firstborn, but mortal men, as Lucifer made you. Yet it seems that you desire now to have the good of both kindreds, to sail to Valinor when you will, and to return when you please to your homes. That cannot be, nor can the Valar take away the gifts of Ilúvatar. The Eldar, you say, are unpunished, and even those who rebuild do not die. Yet that is not to them neither reward nor punishment, but the fulfillment of their being. They cannot escape, and are bound to this world, never to leave it so long as it lasts, for its life is theirs, and you are punished for the rebellion of men, you say, in which you had small part, and so it's that you die, but that was not at first appointed. For a punishment thus you escape, and leave the world, and here and are not bound to it, in hope or in weariness. Which of us therefore should invade the others? And now the Númenorian answered, why should we not invade the Valar, or even the least of the deathless? For of us is required a blind trust, and hope without assurance, knowing not what lies before us in the little while, and yet we also love the earth and would not lose it. Then the messenger said, Indeed, the mind of the Iluvatar concerning you is not known to the Valar, and he has not revealed all things that are to come. But this will hold to be true, that your home is not here, neither in the land of Aman, nor anywhere within the circles of the world, and the doom of men, that they shall depart. Was at first a gift of Iluvatar. It became a grief to them only because coming under the shadow of Morgoth it seemed to them that they were surrounded by a great darkness, of which they were afraid, and some grew wilful and proud and would not yet yield, until life was reft from them. Reft means denied from them. We who bear the ever-mounting burden of the years do not clearly understand this, but if that grief has returned to trouble you, as you say, then we fear that the shadow arises once more and grows again in your heart. Therefore, though you be the Dundane, fairest of men, who escaped from the shadow of old and fought valiantly against it, we say to you, be aware. The will of Ero may not be gainsaid. Gainsaid means denied. Willful means stubborn or deliberate or intended. And the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust to which you are called, lest soon it become again a bond by which you are constrained. Hope rather that in the end even the least of your desire shall have a fruit. The love of Arda was set in your heart by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, maiden age of men unborn may pass ere the purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar. These things took place in days of Tar Kiritan, the shipbuilder, and of the Tar Atanamar, his son, and they were proud men, eager for wealth, and they laid the men of Middle-earth under tribute, taking now rather than giving. It was to Tar Atanamar that the messengers came, and he was the 13th king, and the day as the realm of Numenor had endured for more than 1,000 years, and was come to zenith of its bliss. Zenith means the climax, or the highest level, if not yet of its power, but Atanamar was ill pleased with this counsel of the messengers, and gave little heed to it, and the greater part of his people followed him, for they wished still to escape death in their own day, not waiting upon hope. And Atanamar lived to a great age, clinging to his life beyond the end of all the joy. Clinging means holding or hanging. And he was the first of the Numenor to do his, refusing to depart until he was witless and unmanned. Witless means foolish. Unmanned means not having crew or staff. And denying to his son the kinship at the height of his day. For the lords of Numenor had been wont to wed late in their long lives, and to depart and leave the mastery to their sons when those were to come to full stature and body and mind. Then Tar and Kalimon, son of Atanamar, became the king, and he was of like mind. And in his day the people of Numenor became divided. When on the one hand was the greater party, and they were called the king's men, and they grew proud and were estranged from Eldar and the Valar. And on the other hand was the lesser party, and they were called the Elendili, the Elf-friends, for though they remained loyal indeed to the king and the house of Elros, they wished to keep their friendship of the Eldar, and they hearkened to the counsel of the lords of the West. Nonetheless, even they who named themselves the faithful did not wholly escape from the affliction of their people. Affliction here means the calamity of their people, and they were troubled by thought of death. Thus the bliss of westernness became diminished, but still it might and splendor increase, for the kings and their people had not yet abandoned wisdom, and if they loved the Valar no longer, at least they still feared them. They did not dare openly to break the ban or sail beyond the limits that had been appointed eastwards. Still they steered their tall ships, but the fear of death grew ever darker upon them, and they delayed it by all means that they could, and they began to build great houses for their dead. While their wise men labored unceasingly to discover, if they might, the secrets of recalling life, or at the least of the prolonging of man's day, yet they achieved only the art of perceiving uncorrupt the dead flesh of men, and they filled all the land with silent tombs, in which the thought of death was enshrined in the darkness. Enshrined means place a precious object in a appropriate place or thought. But those that lived turned the more eagerly to pleasure and revelry. Revelry here means festivals, desiring ever more goods and more riches, and after the days of Tar and Calimon, the offspring of the first fruits to eat was neglected. Neglected means ignored, and men went seldom any more to the hollow upon the height of Menatoma in the midst of the land. Thus it came to pass in that time that the Numenorians first made a great settlement upon the west shores of the ancient land, for their own land seemed to them shrunken, and they had no rest or content therein. And they desired now wealth and dominion in Middle-earth, since the wit was denied. Great harbours and strong towers they made, and there many of them took up their abode, but they appeared no rather as a lords and masters and gatherers of tribute than a harbours and treachers. And the great ships of Numenorian were borne east on the winds, and returned ever laden, means loaded. And the power and majesty of their kings were increased, and they drank, and they feasted, and they called themselves in silver and gold. In all this the elf friends had small part. They alone came now ever to the north and the land of Gil-galad, keeping their friendship with the elves and lending them aid against Sauron, and their haven was Belagir, above the mouth of Anduin the Great, but the king's men sailed for away to the south. In all the and the lordship and strongholds that they might have left many rumors in the legends of men. In this age, as it's elsewhere told, Sauron arose again in Middle-earth, and go and turned back to evil, in which he was nurtured by Morgoth, become mighty in his service. Already in the days of Tar-Miaster, the 11th king of Numenor, he had fortified the land of Mordor, and he had built there the Tower of Barad-dûr, and therefore he strove ever for the dominion of Middle-earth, to become a king over all the kings, and as a god unto men. And Sauron hated the Numenorians because of their deeds of their fathers and their ancient alliance with the elves and allegiance to the Valar. Nor did he forgive the aid that Tar-Miaster had rendered to Gil-galad of old. In that time, when the One Ring was forged, and there was a war between Sauron and the elves in Eriador. Now he learned that the kings of Numenor had increased in power and splendor, and he hated them the more, and he feared them, lest they should invade his lands and wrest from him the dominion of the east. But for a long time he had not dared to challenge the lords of the sea, and he withdrew from the coasts. Yet Sauron was ever guileful, and it said that among those whom he ensnared with the 9 rings there were great lords of Numenorian's race. And when the Adaire arose that they were the ring's wraiths, or phantoms, his servants, and the strength of his terror and mastery over men, he had grown exceedingly great. He began to sail the strong place of the Numenorians upon the shores of the sea. Guileful means extremely cunning. In those days the shadow grew deeper upon Numenor, and the lives of the kings of the house of Elros waned because of their rebellion. But they hardened their hearts more against the Valar, and the 19th king took the scepter of his father. Scepter means the mace, an ornamented staff carried by the rulers. And he ascended the throne in the names of Adon-Kahor, lords of the west, forsaking the elven tongue and forbidding their use in his hearing. Yet high the scroll of the kings, the name Herion was inscribed in the high elven speech, because of the ancient custom which the kings feared to break utterly, lest evil befall. Now the status seemed to be fearful overbroad, being the title of the Valar, and their hearts were sorely tied between their loyalty to the House of Elros and their reverence to the appointed powers of the appointed powers. But worse was yet to come, for our Gimilzor, the 22nd king, was the greatest enemy of the faithful, and his day the White Tree was untended, and began to decline, as he forbade utterly the use of the elven tongues, and punished those that welcomed the ships of Erisir, that still secretly to the west shores of the land. Now the Elandali dwelt mostly in the western regions of the Numenor, but Argimilzor commanded all that he could discover to be of this party to remove from the west and dwell in the east of the land, and they were watched, and the chief dwelling of the faithful in the later days was thus nigh to the harbour of Romena. Thence many set sail to Middle-earth, seeking the northern coast, where they might speak still with the Eldar in the kingdom of Gallant. This was known to the kings, but they hindered it not, so long as the Elandalis departed from their land and did not return, for they desired to end all the friendship between them people and the Eldar of Erisir, whom they named the spies of the Valar, hoping to keep their deeds and their counsels hidden from the lords of the west. But all that they did was known to Manwë, and the Valar were wroth with their kings of Numenor, and gave them counsel and protection no more, and the ships of Erisir came never again out of the sunset, and the havens of Anduin were forlorn. Forlorn here means miserable or pitiful, sad, and abandoned or lonely. Highest in honor after the house of the kings were the lords of Anduin, for they were of the line of Elros, being descended from Silmarillion, daughter of Tar Elendil, the fourth king of Numenor, and those lords were loyal to the kings and revered them, and the lord of Anduin was ever among the chief counsellor of the sceptre. Yet also from the beginning they bore special love to the Eldar and reverence for the Valar, and as a shadow grew they aided the faithful as they could, but for long they did not declare themselves openly, and sought rather to amend the hearts of the lords of the sceptre with wiser counsel. Amend means here repair or help or fix. There was a lady, Enzelbeth, renowned for her beauty, and her mother was Lendoran, sister of Earendor, the lord of Anduin, in the days of Ars-Calithar, father of Gimilzor. Gimilzor took her to wife, though this was little to her liking, for she was in heart one of the faithful, being taught by her mother. But the kings and their sons were not grown proud and not be gainsayed in their wishes. No love was there between Gimilzor and his queen, or between their sons. Enzelduin, the eldest, was like his mother in mind as in body, but Gimilcalt the younger went with his father, unless he were yet prouder and more wilful. To him, Gimilzor would have yielded the sceptre rather than to be the elder son, if the laws had allowed. But when Enzaldun assessed this sceptre, access means just like having the to the sceptre, he took again a title in the elfin tongue as of old, calling himself Tar Balantir, for he was far-sighted both in the eye and in mind, and even those that hated him feared his words as those of the true seer. Seer is like the person who's supposed to know what the future holds. He gave peace for a while to the faithful, and he went once more at the due season to the hollow of Uro upon the mountain Tarma, which Gimilzor had forsaken. The white tree had tended again with honor, and he prophesied, saying that when the tree perished, then also will be the line of the king come to its ends. But the repentance was too late to appease the anger of the Valar. Appease means to a way of calm or pacify or placate. with the insolence of his fathers. With the insolence means the foolishness of his fathers, of which the great or arrogance, of which the greater part of his people did not repent. And Gimmelcat was strong and ungentle. Ungentle means not showing moral acts. And he took the leadership of those that he had been called the king's men, and opposed the will of his brother as openly as he dared, and yet more in secret. Thus the day of Tar Palantir became darkened with grief, and he would spend much of his time in the west, and there ascended often the ancient tower of King Minaster upon the hill of Orometh, nigh to Anduin, whence he gazed westward in the yearning, hoping to see maybe some sail upon the sea, but no ship came ever again from the west to Numenor, and Avalone was veiled in cloud. Veiled means covered in cloud. Now Gimmelcat died 2 years before his 200th year, which was accounted as early death for one of the Elros line, even in its waning. But this brought no peace to the king, for Pharazôn, son of Gimmelcat, had become a man yet more restless and eager for wealth and power than his father. He had fared often abroad, as here fared means travel abroad, as a leader in the wars that the Numenorians made then in the coastlands of Middle-earth, seeking to extend their dominion over men. And this he had won a great renown as a captain both in the land and by the sea. Therefore, when he came back to Numenor, hearing of his father's death, the hearts of the people were turned to him, for he brought with him great wealth, and was for that time free in his giving. And it came to pass that the Palantir grew weary of grief and died. He had no son, but a daughter only, whom he named Meriel in the elven tongue, and to her now by right and laws of the Numenorians came the scepter. But Pharazôn took her to wife against her will, doing evil in this and evil also in the laws of Numenor, did not permit the marriage even in the royal house of those more nearly akin than cousins in the second degree. And when they were wedded, he seized the scepter into his own hand, taking this title of Pharazôn, Tur-Kallion in the elven tongue, and the name of his queen he changed to Ar-Zimraphel. The mightiest and brightest was Pharazôn, the golden of all those that had wielded the scepter of the Sea King since the foundation of Numenor, and 23 kings and queens had ruled the Numenorians before, and slept now in their deep tombs under the mount of Minaltarma, lying upon beds of gold. And sitting upon his carven throne in the city of Armenelos, in the glory of his power, he brooded darkly, thinking of war. Brooded here means thinking or giving heed secretly. Thinking of war, for he had learned in Middle-earth of the strength of the realm of Sauron, and of his hatred of westerners, and now there came to him the masters of ships and captains returning out of the east, and they reported that Sauron was putting forth his might, since Pharazôn had gone back from Middle-earth, and he was pressing down upon the cities by the coast, and he had taken now the title of the king of men, and declared his purpose to drive the Numenors into the sea, and to destroy even Numenor, if they might be. Great was the anger of Pharazôn at these tidings, and he has pondered long in secret. His heart was filled with desire of power unbounded, and the sole dominion of his will, and he determined without counsel of the valor or the aid of any wisdom but his own, the title of king of men he will himself claim, and will compel Sauron to become his vassal and his servants. Compel here means force or oblige. Vassal servants or little ones, for in his pride he deemed that no king shall ever rise so mighty as to vie with their heir of Arundel. Vie here means combat. Therefore he began in the time to smithy great hordes of weapons and many ships of war, and built and stored them with his arms. And when all was made ready, for he himself set sail with his host into the east. And men saw his sails coming out of the sunset, dyed is mere stained, as with scarlet, and gleaming with red and golden, and fell upon the dwellers by the coast, and they fled far away. But the fleet came at last to the place that was called Umbar, where was the mighty haven of the Númenorians that no hand had wrought. Empty and silent were all the lands about when the king of the sea marched upon Middle-earth. For 7 days he journeyed with the banner and trumpet, and he came to hell, and he went up, and he set there his pavilion and his throne. Pavilion means stronghold. And he set him down in the midst of the land, and the tents of his host were ranged all about him, blue, golden, and white, as a field of tall flowers. Then he sent forth heralds, and he commanded Sauron to come before him and swear to him fealty. Fealty here means loyalty. And Sauron came, even from his mighty tower of Barad-dûr. He came and made no offer of battle, for he perceived that the power and majesty of the kings of the sea surpassed all rumour of them, so that he could not trust even the greatest of his servants to withstand them. And he saw not his time yet to work his will with the Dundane, and he was crafty, well skilled to gain what he would by subtlety, when force might not avail. Therefore he humbled himself before Farazon, and smoothed his tongue, and men wondered, for all that he said seemed fair and wise. But Farazon was not yet deceived. It came into his mind that for the better keeping of Sauron and of his oath of fealty, he should be brought to Númenor, there to dwell as a hostage for himself and all his servants in Middle-earth. To this Sauron assented. Assent means expressed, to approve, as one constrained. Yet in his secret thought he received it gladly, for it chimed indeed with his desire. Chimed means, let's say, be in agreement, or harmonize, or concert. And Sauron passed over the sea, and looked upon the land of Númenor, and of the city of Armenorras, and the city of its glory, in the days of its glory, and he was astounded, but his heart within was filled the more with envy and hate. Yet such was the cunning of his mind and mouth, and the strength of his hidden will, that ere the 3 years had passed, he had become closer to the secret counsel of the king. For flattery sweet, as a honey, was ever on his tongue. Flattery means excessive and insincere praise. And knowledge he had of many things, yet unrevealed to men, and seeing the favour that he had of their lord of all the councillor, began to fawn upon him. Fawn give a servile display, or exaggerated flattery, or affection, or affliction. Save when alone, Amandel, lord of Anduin. Then slowly a change came over the land, and the hearts of the elf friends were sorely troubled, and many fell away out of fear. Although those that remained still called themselves the faithful, their enemies named them rebels. For now, having the ears of men, Sauron with many arguments gainsaid all that the Valar had taught, and he bade men think that in the world, in the east, and even high the west, high here means midst, or in the middle, there lay yet many seas and many lands for their winning. There wherein was wealth uncounted, and still if they should at last come to the end of those lands and seas. Beyond all lay the ancient darkness, and out of this world was made, for darkness alone is worshipful, and the Lord therefore may yet make other worlds to be gifted to those that serve him, so that the increase of their power shall find no end. And Farazon said, Who is the Lord of the darkness? Then behind locked door Sauron spoke to the king, and he lied, saying, It is he whose name is not now spoken, for the Valar have deceived you concerning him, putting forward the name of Ero, a phantom devised in the folly of their hearts. seeking to enchain man in their servitude to themselves, for they are the oracle of this era, oracle messengers, which spoke only what they will, but he that is their master shall yet prevail or dominate, and he will deliver you from this phantom, and his name is Melkor, Lord of all, giver of freedom, and he shall make you stronger than they. Because Morgoth was casted away from Arda, outside Arda, where he is looming in Aya, or in the darkness around Arda. Then Arthrazon the king turned back to the worship of the dark, and of the Melkor the Lord of the earth, at first in secret, but ere long openly and in the face of his people, and they for the most part followed him, yet there dwelt still a remnant of this faithful, as has been told, at Romena, and in the country near, and other few there were here and there in the land. The chief among them to whom they looked for of the king and his son Elendil, whose son were Isildur and Anarion, then young men by the reckoning of Numenor, or by the considering of Numenor, Amandel and Elendil were great ship captains, and they were of the line of Elros, Tar, Miniator. They were not of the ruling house to whom belonged the crown and the throne in the city of Arminolas. In the days of their youth together, Amandel had been dear to Phrazan, and though he was of the elf friends, he remained in his council until the coming of Sauron. Now he was dismissed, for Sauron hated him above all others in Numenor. But he was not so noble, and had been so mighty a captain of the sea, that he was still held in honor by many of the people, and neither the king nor Sauron dared to lay hands on him as yet. Therefore Amandel withdrew to Romena, and all that he trusted still to be faithful he summoned to come thither in secret, for he feared that evils would now grow apace, speedy means or fastly, and all the friends were in peril, other friends were in peril, and so it soon came to pass, for the Minel Tarma was utterly deserted in those days, and though not even Sauron dared to defile the high place, yet the king would let no man upon pain or of a death ascend to it, not even those of the faithful who kept Ilúvatar in their heart. And Sauron urged the king to cut down the white tree, Nimloth the fair, and go in his court, for it was memorial of the altar and of the light of Valinor. At the first the king would not assent to this, since he believed that the fortunes of his house were bound by the tree, as was forspoken by Tar Barantel. Thus in his folly he who hated the Eldar and the Valar vainly clung to the shadow of the old allegiance of Numenor. Vainly means here without thinking. Clung to the hung to the old allegiance of Numenor, but when Amandel heard rumor of the evil purpose of Sauron, he was grieved to the heart, knowing that in the end Sauron would surely have his will. Then he spoke to Elendil and the sons of Elendil, calling tale of the trees of Valinor, and Isildur said no word, but went out by night and did a deed for which he was afterwards renowned, for he was passed along in disguise to Arminolas and to the courts of the kings, which were now forbidden to the faithful, and he came to the place of the tree, which was forbidden to all by the orders of Sauron, and the tree was washed day and night by gods in his service. At that time Nimloth was dark and bore no bloom, for it was late in the autumn, and winter was nigh, and Isildur passed through the gods and took from the tree a fruit that hung upon it, and turned to go, but the god was aroused, and he was assailed, and fought his way out, receiving many wounds, and he escaped, and because he was disguised it was not discovered who had laid hands on the tree. But Isildur came at last hardly back to Romena, and delivered the fruit to the hands of Armandel, ere his strength failed him. Then the fruit was planted in secret, and was blessed by Armandel, and a shoot arose from it and sprouted in the spring. But when its first leaf opened, then Isildur, who had lain long and come near to death, arose and was troubled no more by his wounds. None too soon was this done. None too soon means things happen just before this, or another meaning, just before something happens. Just before something happens. None too soon was this done. For after the Ezel, the king yielded to Sauron and felled the white tree. Felled his means cuts, and turned then wholly away from the allegiance of his fathers. But Sauron caused to be built upon the hill in the midst of the city of the Numenorians, Amnilos the Golden, a mighty temple, and was the form of a circle at the base. And their walls were 50 feet in thickness, and the width of the base was 500 feet across the center, and the walls arose from the ground 500 feet, and they were crowned with a mighty dome. Dome means a covered roof with a circular base, just like in mosque or in citadel. And that dome was roofed all with silver, and rose glittering in the sun, so that the light of it could be seen afar off. But soon the light was darkened, and the silver became black, for there was an altar of fire in the midst of the temple, and the topmost of the dome there was a louver. Louver here means each of a set of angled slats or flat strip fixed or hung at a regular interval in a door, a shutter or screen to allow air or light to pass through, just like the new window. Once there issued a great smoke, and the first fire upon the altar. Sauron kindled with the hewn wood of Nimloth, and crackled, and was crackled a sound of crack, and was consumed. But men marveled at the creak as the smoke that went up from it, so that the land lay under a cloud for 7 days, until slowly it passed into the west. Thereafter the fire and smoke went up without ceasing, for the power of Sauron daily increased. And that temple was spilling of blood and torment and great wickedness. Wickedness means evil. Man made sacrifice to Melkor that he should release them from death. And most often from among the faithful they choose their victim, and never openly on the charge that they will not worship Melkor, the giver of freedom. Rather was cause sought against them that they hated the king and were his rebels, or that they plotted against their kin, devising lies and poisons. Their charges were for the most part false, yet those were bitter days, and hate brings forth hate. But for this death did not depart from the land, rather it came sooner and more often and in many dreadful guises. For whereas aforetime men had grown slowly old, and had laid them down in the end to sleep, when they were weary at last of the world, yet madness and sickness assailed them, and yet they were afraid to die and go out into dark, and the realm of the Lord that they had taken, and they cursed themselves in their agony. And men took weapons in those days and slew one another for little cause, for they were become quick to anger. And Sauron or those who had bound to himself went about the land, setting men against men, so that the people murmured against the king and the lords, or against any that had oath that they had not. Anything here means out means. And the men of the bower took cruel revenge. Nonetheless, for long it seemed to the Numenorians that they prospered, and if they were not an increase in happiness, yet they grow more strong, and their rich men ever richer. For with the aid of counsel of Sauron they multiplied then, possession of and they devised engines, and they built ever greater ships, and they sailed now with the power and armor to Middle Earth, and they came no longer as bringers of gift, nor even as a ruler, but as fierce men of war. And they hunted the men of Middle Earth, and took their goods and enslaved them. And many they slew cruelly upon their altars. Altars mean a table mid a building for feast. For they built in their fortresses temples and the great tombs in those days, and men feared them, and the memory of the kindly kings of the ancient days faded from the world, and was darkened by many tale of dread. Thus Ar-Pharazôn, king of the land of the star, grew to the mightiest tyrant that had yet been in the world since the reign of Morgoth. Through and through Sauron ruled all them from behind, all thrown, but the years passed, and the king felt the shadow of death approach as his days lengthened, and he was filled with fear and wrath. Now came the hour that Sauron had prepared. Long he had waited, and Sauron spoke to the king, saying that his strength was now so great that he might think to have his will in all things, and be subject to no command or ban. And he said, the Valar have possessed themselves of the land where there is no death, and they lie to you concerning it, hiding it as best as they may, because of their avarice and their fear that lest the kings of men should wrest from them the deathless realm, and all the world in their state. And though doubtless the gift of life unending is not for all, but only for such as worthy, being men of might and pride, and great lineage, yet against all justice is that done, that this gift, which is his due, his own here, should be withheld from the kings of banks, Ar-Pharazôn, mightiest of the sons of the earth, to whom Manwë alone can be compared. Even if even he but great kings do not brook denials and take what is theirs due. Avarice means greed, or a gooch. Due here means what is owned for someone. Banks means anger and force. Brook, tolerate or allow. Denials, declaring something untrue. Yes. Then Ar-Pharazôn being bestowed, being filled with the grace, or let's say here bestowed means strongly intoxicated and infatuated, and walking under the shadow of death, for his span was drawing toward its end, hearkened to Sauron, and he began to ponder in his heart how he might make war upon the Valar. He was long preparing this design, and he spoke not openly of it, yet it could not be hidden from all. And Amandel, becoming aware of this purpose of the king, was dismayed and filled with a great dread, for he knew that men could not vanquish the Valar in war, and that ruin must come upon the world, if this war were not stayed. Therefore he called his son Elendil, and he said to him, the days are dark, and there is no hope for men, for the faithful are few, and therefore I am minded to try that counsel which our forefather Elendil took of old, to sail into the west, to be their ban or no, and to speak to the Valar, even to Manwë himself, if they may be, and beseech his aid ere all is lost. Minded means thinking, that beseech means asking or requesting. Will you then betray the king, said Elendil, for you know that well that charge that may be made against us, that we are traitors and spies, and that until this day it has been false. If I thought that Manwë need such a messenger, said Amandel, I will betray the king, for there is but one loyalty from which no man can be absolved. Absolved means forgiven in heart for any cause, but it's for a mercy upon men and their deliverance from Sauron the deceiver that I will bleed. Since some at least have remained faithful, and as for the ban, I will suffer in myself the penalty, lest all my people should become guilty. But what think you, my father, is like to befall those of your house whom you leave behind, when your deed becomes known? It must not become known, said Amandel. I will prepare my going in secret, and I will set sail into the east, whither daily the ships depart from our haven, and thereafter, as I went and a chance may allow, I will go about through south or north, back into this west, and seek what I may find. But for you and your folk, my son, I counsel that you should prepare yourselves our other ships, and put abroad all such things that as your hearts cannot bear to part with. And when the ships are ready, you should lie in the haven of Romena, and give out among men that you purpose when you see your time to follow me into the east. Amendel is no longer so dear to our kinsman upon the throne that he will grieve overmuch if we seek to depart, for a season or for good. But let it not be seen that you intended to take many men, or he will be troubled, because of the war that he now plots, for which he will need all the force that he may gather. Seek out the faithful that are now still to be true, and let them join you in secret, if they are willing to go with you, and share in your design. And what shall that design be? Said Elendil. To meddle not in the war. Meddle means not parasite or not watching in the war. And to watch, answered Amandel. Until I return I can say no more, but it's most like that you shall fly from the land of the star with no star to guide you, for that land is defiled. Then you shall lose all that you have loved, for testing death in life, seeking a land of exile elsewhere, but east or west there's valor alone can say. Then Amandel said farewell to all his household as one that is about to die, for said he, it may be well proved that you will see me never again, and that I shall show you no such signs as Arundel showed long ago, but hold you ever in readiness, for the end of the world that we have known is not at hand. Now at hand. It is said that Amandel set sail in a small ship at night, and steered first eastward, and then went about and passed into the west, and he took with him 3 servants dear to his heart, and never again were they heard of by word or sign in this world, nor is there any tale or guess of their fate. Men could not second time be served by any such embassy, and for the treason of Númenor there was no easy absolving or forgiving. But Elendil did all that his father had bidden, and his ships lay off the east coast of the land, and the faithful put aboard their wives and their children, and their heirlooms, and the great store of goods. Many things there were of beauty and power, such as the Numenians had contrived or made in their days of their wisdom, vessels and jewels and scrolls of lore written in the scarlet and black and 7 stones. They had the gift of the Eldar, but in the ship of Isildur was guarded the long tree, the Scion. Scion here is the seat of the Nimloth the Fair. Thus Elendil held himself in readiness, and did not meddle in the evil deeds of these days, and ever he looked for a sign that did not come. Then he journeyed in secret to into their western shores, and gazed out over the seas, for sorrow and yearning were laid upon him, and he had great loved his father. But not could he descry save the fleece of Arv-Prazan gathering in the havens of the west. Now aforetime in the Isle of Numenor the weather was never up to the needs and liking of men. Rain in due seasons, and ever in measures, and sunshines now warmer, now cooler, now winter, and winds from the sea. And when the wind was in the west, it seemed to many that it was filled with a fragrance, fleeing but sweet, heart-stirring, as of flowers that bloom forever in the undying meads, and have no names. And have no names on the mortal shores, but all that was now changed, for the sky itself was darkened, and there were storms of rain and hail in those days, and the violent winds, and ever and anon soon a great ship of Numenorians would founder and return not to haven, though such a grief had not till then befallen them since the rising of the star. And out of the west there would come at times a great cloud in the evening, shaped as it were an eagle, with the pinions spread. Pinions here means wing, spread to the north and the south, and slowly it would loom up, blotting out the sunset. Blotting means covering here, the sunset, or staying the sunset. And then uttermost night would fall upon Numenor, and some of the eagles bore lighting beneath their wings, and the thunder echoed between sea and cloud. Then men grew afraid. Behold, the eagles of the lords of the west, they cried. The eagles of Manwë are come upon Numenor, and they fell upon their faces. Then some few would repent for a season, but others hardened their hearts, and they shook their fists at heaven, saying, The lords of the west have plotted against us. They strike first, the next blow shall be ours. These words the king himself spoke, but they were devised by Sauron. Now the lightning increased and slew men upon the hills and in the fields and in the streets of the city. And a fiery bolt smote the dome of the temple and shore it asunder, means broke it, or torn, let's say, make it apart. And it was wreathed in flame. Wreath means covered or start burning with the flame. But the temple itself was unshaken, and Sauron stood there upon the pinnacle at the climax, and defied the lightning, and it was unharmed. And in that hour men called him a god, and did all that he would. When therefore the last portent came, they heeded it little, for the land shook under them, and a groaning as of thunder. Portent means warning or forbidding by messenger. Groaning make a deep and articulate sound and is supposed to be just like shock. And a groaning of a thunder underground was mingled with the roaring of the sea, and smoke issued from the peak of the mineral Tarma. But all that more did Arbarazan press on with his armament. In that time the fleet of the Númenorian darkened the sea upon the west of the land, and they were like an archipelago. Archipelago means it's a concept, means a group of islands, just like a group of islands called archipelago, which resemble or refer to the greatest numbers of the ships. Archipelago of 1,000 isles, their masts were as the masts taller things in the ships, were as a forest upon the mountains, and their sail like a brooding cloud, just darkening cloud. And their banner were golden and black, and all things waited upon the word of Farazan. And Sauron withdrew into the inmost circle of the temple, and men brought him victims to be burned. Then the eagles of the Lord of the West came up out of the dayfall, and they were arrayed as for a battle, advancing in line, advancing in a line, the end of which diminished beyond sight, and as they came their wings spread ever wider, grasping the sky. But the west burned red behind them, and they glowed beneath, as though they were lit with a flame of great anger, so that all Númenor was illuminated as with a smouldering fire. Smouldering means burning fire. And men looked upon the faces of their fellows, and it seemed to them that they were red with wrath. Then Arbarazan hardened his heart, and he went aboard his mighty ship, Alcorandas, castle of the sea. Many oared it, and many masted, golden and stable, and upon it the throne of Arbarazan was set. Then he did on his panoply and his crown. Panoply means clothing. And let's raise his standard. He gave the signal for the raising of the anchors, and in that hour the trumpets of the Númenor outrang the thunder. Outrang means exceeding or surpassing the thunder. Thus the fleets of the Númenorian moved against the Minans of the west. Minans here means just like rage. at the west, and there was little wind, but they had many oars and many strong slaves to row beneath the lash. The sun went down, and there came a great silence. Darkness fell upon the land, and the sea was still, while the world waited for that which should betide. Slowly the fleet passed out of the sight of the watchers in the havens, and their light faded, and the night took them, and in the morning they were gone, for a wind arose in the east, and it wafted them away. And they broke the ban of the Valar and sailed into the forbidden seas, going up with war against the deathless, to wrest from them everlasting life with the circles of the world. But the fleet of Elbrazan came up out of the deeps of the sea and encompassed Avalone. Encompassed means surrounded Avalone and all this isle of Erisea, and the elder mourned, for the light of the setting sun was cut off by the cloud of the Numenorians, and at last Elbrazan came even to Aman, the blessed realm, on the coast of Valinor, and still all was silent, and doom hung by a thread. For Elbrazan wavered at the end. Wavered means that like sign of not just like upsetting or have a doubtful. At the end, and almost he turned back. His heart misgave him when he looked upon the soundless shores, so tranquil, shining whiter than snow, colder than death, silent, immutable, terrible as the shadow of the light of Ilúvatar. But Bride was now his master, and at last he left his ship and strode upon the shore, claiming the land of his own, if none should do battle for it. And a host of the Numenorians encamped in might upon Tuna, whence all the elder had fled. Then man we upon the mountain called upon Ilúvatar, and for the time the Valar laid down their government of Arda. But Ilúvatar showed forth his power, and he changed the fashion of the world. A great chasm opened in the sea between Numenorian and the deathless lands, and the waters flowed down into it, and the noise and smoke of the cataracts went up to heaven. Cataract means large waterfall. Went up to heaven, and the world was shaken, and all the fleets of the Numenorian were drawn down into the abyss, and they were drowned and swallowed up forever. But Elbrazan, the king, and the mortal warriors that had set foot upon the land of Aman were buried under the failing hills. There it said that they lay imprisoned in the caves of the Forgotten until the last battle on the day of doom, as prophesied after Morgoth's return. But the land of Aman and Erisea of the older were taken away and removed beyond the reach of the men forever. And Andor, the land of gift, Númenor of the kings, Alena of the star of Arundel, was utterly destroyed, for it was nigh to the east of the great rift. Rift means refer to the chasm that opened in the sea, or the slit. And its foundation were overturned, means the bases overturned or flipped, and it fell and went down into the darkness, and it's no more. There is no now upon earth any place abiding where the memory of a time without evil is preserved. For Ilúvatar cast back the great seas west of the middle earth, and the empty lands east of it, and the new lands and new seas were made, and the world was diminished, for Valinor and Erisea were taken from it into the realm of hidden things. In that hour, unlooked for a man, this doom befell, on the 39th day since the passing of the fleets. Then suddenly fire burst from the Minal Tarma, and there came a mighty wind, and tumult of the earth, and the sky reeled, and the hills slid, and the Númenor went down into the sea, with all its children, and its wives, and its maidens, and its ladies brought, and all its gardens, and all its halls, and its towers, its tombs, its riches, and its jewels, and its webs, and its things painted and carven, its laws, they vanished forever, and at last of all the mounting wave, green and cold, and plumped with foam, climbing over the land, took it to bosom, Silmarillion the queen, fairer than silver, or ivory, or pearl. Too late she strove to ascend the steep way out of the mineral torment to the whole place, for the waters overtook her, and her cry was lost in the roaring of the wind. But whether or not it were that Amandel came indeed to Valinor, and Manwë hearkened to his prayer, by a grace of the Valar, Elendil and his sons and their people were spared from the ruin of that day. For Elendil had remained in Romina, refusing the summons of the kings when he set forth to war, and avoiding the soldiers of the Sauron that came to seize him, and drag him to the flares of the temples. He went aboard his ship and stood off from the shore, waiting on time. There was protected by the land by the great rout of the sea that drew all towards the abyss. Wafted means push, encompass means surrounded, wavered, hesitate, misgave means have given him a doubt or warning. Foundation as a base, a bidding continuous. He went aboard his ship, waiting on the where he was protected by the land from the great rout of the sea that drew all towards the abyss, and afterwards he was sheltered from the first fury of the storm. But when the devouring wave rolled over the land and Númenor trop led to its fall, then he would have been overwhelmed and would have deemed it the lesser grief to perish, for no wrench is noble of death could be more bitter than the loss and the agony of that day. But the great wind took him wilder than any wind that men had known, roaring from the west, and swept his ships far away, and rent their sails and snapped their masts, hunting the unhappy men like straws upon the water. 9 ships there were, 4 for Elendil, and for Isildur 3, and for Anarion 2, and they fled before the black gale, out of the twilight of doom. Gale here means the storm. Drought means event. Of the twilight into the darkness of the world, and the deeps rose beneath them in the towering anger, and waves like into mountains moving with the great caps. Caps means the head or the upper part of written snow, bore them up amid the wreckage of the clouds. Written means twisted and controlled out of normal shape. Wreckage means debris. And after many days cast them away upon the shore of Middle Earth, and all that coast and seaward regions of the western world suffered a great change and ruin in that time, for the seas invaded the lands and snows and shores foundered, and the ancient isle were drowned, and new isle were uplifted, and hills crumbled, and rivers were turned into strange courses. Elendil and his sons, after founded kingdoms in Middle Earth, and though their lure and craft was but an echo of that which had been ere Sauron came to Númenor, yet very great it seemed to the wild men of the world, and much is said in other lore of the deeds of the heirs of Elendil, or the inheritance of Elendil, in the age that came after, and of their strife with Sauron that not yet was ended. For Sauron himself was filled with a great fear at wrath of the Valar, and the doom that eroded upon sea and land. It was greater far than aught he had looked for, hoping only for the death of the Númenorians and the defeat of their proud king. And Sauron, sitting in his black seat in the midst of the temple, had laughed when he heard the trumpets of Arbrazon sounding for battle, and again he had laughed when he heard the thunder of the storm. And the third time, even as he laughed at his own thought, thinking what he would do now in the world, being rid of the Eden forever, he was taken in the midst of his mirth. Mirth here means the amusement. of his amusement, his seat and his temple fell into the abyss. But Sauron was not of mortal flesh. He's a Maya. He don't need a body to. He just need a body to incarnate to anything. Though he was robbed now out of the shape in which robbed means despoiled from the shape in which he had wrought so great an evil, so that he could never again appear fair to the eyes of man. Yet his spirit arose out of the deep and passed as a shadow and black wind over the sea, and came back to Middle-earth and to Mordor, that was his home. There he took up again his great ring in Barad's door, and dwelt there dark and silent, until he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible, and the eye of Sauron the terrible few could endure. But those things came not into the tale of drowning of Numenor, of which now all is told, and even as the name of that land perished, and men spoke thereafter not of Elena, nor of Andor the gift that was taken away, nor of Numenor on the confines of the world, but the exiles of the shores of the sea. If they turned towards the west in the desire of their heart, spoke of Mauron Falmar, the way was that was whelmed in the waves, AKALLABêTH, the downfall Atlanti in the Alderian tongue. Among the exiles, many believed that the summit of the Mineral Torma, the pillar of heaven, was not drowned forever, but rose again above the waves, as a lonely island lost in the great waters, for it had been a hallowed place, and even in the days of Sauron none had defiled it, and some there was aware of the seed of Erendel that afterward sought for it, because it was said among Blue Master that the far-sighted men of old could see from the Mineral Torma a glimmer of the deathless land. For even after the ruin, the hearts of the Dúnedain were still set westward, and though they knew indeed that the world was changed, they said, Avalon is vanished from the earth, and the land of Aman is taken away, and in the world of the present darkness they cannot be found. Yet once they were, and therefore they still are, in true being and in the whole shape of the world, as at first it was devised. For the Dúnedain is that even mortal men, if so blessed, might look upon other times than those of their body's life, and they longed ever to escape from the shadows of their exile, and to see in some fashions the light that dies not. For the sorrow of the thought of death had pursued them over the deeps of the sea. Thus it was that great mariners among them would still search the empty seas, hoping to come upon the isle of Mineral Torma, and there to see a vision of things that were, but they found it not. And those that sailed far came only to the new lands, and found them like to the old lands, and subject to death. And those that sailed further set but a girdle about the earth, and returned weary at last to the place of their beginning. And they said, all roads are now pens. Thus in after days, what by the voyage of ships, what by laws and starcraft, the kings of men knew that the world was indeed made round, and yet the Eldar were permitted still to depart and come to the ancient west, and to Avalon, if they would. Therefore the lore masters of men say that a straight road must still be for those that were permitted to find it, and they thought that while the new world fell away, the old road and the path of the memory of the west still went on, as it was were a mighty bridge, invisible, that passed through the air of breath and of light, which were bent now as the world was bent, and traversed Elmen here is the atmosphere, which flesh unaided cannot endure, until it came to Tol Erisia, the lowly isle, and maybe even beyond, to Valinor, where the Valar still dwell and watch the unfolding of the story of the world. And tales and rumors arose along the shores of the sea, concerning miners and men forlorn upon the waters, who by some fate or grace or favor of the Valar had entered in upon the straightway, and seen the face of the world sink below them, and so had come to that land-built quays of Avalon, or verily to the last beaches of the margin of Aman, and there had looked upon the white mountains dreadful and beautiful before they died. And this is the end of this chapter.